All right, so for this topic video, we're going to be talking about the properties of integrals. To do this, I'm going to go ahead and throw up an example graph, just so we have a reference. I'm going to have my function here, I'm going to call it big F of x. And it's going to start here at A, and it's going to go until B. And remember, the integral gives us the area underneath this curve right here. So the first property, and probably the most straightforward, is that if I've got the integral from A to B of a constant times my function f of x, then I can just pull that constant out front and do the constant times the integral from A to B of big F of x. A good visual of this is, say the constant was 2, then all that means is every point on this function would be doubled. And so instead of being here, we'd be up here. And so barring my horrible art skills, you can see that that basically just doubles the area underneath. So 2 times that integral. Now, another property is the integral from A to B of little f of x plus or minus little g of x is equal to the integral from A to B of little f of x plus or minus the integral from A to B of little g of x. So what does this look like? Well, say I cut my function, or let's say big F of x in general, actually, the way I get this graph is it's equal to some other function plus another function. Well then, I would just need the area under both cumulatively, is basically what this is saying. So yeah, it's hard to visualize what f of x or g of x on their own could be, because you could have something like x squared, but then as soon as you add another x into it, that causes the whole graph to suddenly wiggle and change. But the point is, if you've got that plus or minus in there where you can split it, you can do that and do the individual integrals, which is pretty useful. An easier property to visualize is, say I've got the integral from A to B of just my function, big F of x. I can split it arbitrarily. And so I can say, let's do the integral from A to C of f of x dx. Let's add that to the integral from C to B of big F of x dx. So if I put, say, C like right here, then what this property is telling me is I can just do the integral for this part first and then add it to the integral for this part. That's all this property is saying, which is super useful. So those are the main properties of an integral that would be very useful to you. And so again, this is just an attempt to visualize what's going on. If you've got a constant in the integral, you can pull it out. If you've got plus or minus going on, you can just split those into 2 separate integrals, and you can arbitrarily split any integral at some constant c, and then go from there. And so that is this topic video covering the basic properties for integration.